Aloha everybody and welcome back to Vision Quest Astrology. This is Kyle. Thank you for joining me today for another astrological video. It's been a minute. I'm getting back into the groove of making these. Been doing a lot of traveling this year and I'm finally in a place where I can sit down and make videos again. So thumbs up for that. This is kind of an update video to a series that I started a while ago about Saturn transiting the first house. Yeah, that again. We are at the end of Saturn in Sagittarius, and towards the end of Saturn in Scorpio, first going into Saturn in Sagittarius, Saturn started transiting my first house and was conjunct my ascendant, which, as most astrological people in this community know, is a really big deal. It's a big transit, and I was just showcasing what my experience was like. I think I made 3 or 4 videos about it, just kind of as like updates in my personal journey and to get feedback from you guys who are going through the transit. First, want to say that Saturn, no matter where it's at, whether it's in your first house, your 12th house, your 5th, or your 8th house, wherever it's transiting, it's going to be hard. Saturn is not a planet that promises easy things. It is dealing with karma and destiny and fate, and the challenges and obstacles and limitations in life that are trialing us, but are working us to make us stronger so that we can perfect and get better at our craft and be as good as we possibly can be in our jobs and our personal lives and in everything that we do and touch. I'm a pretty big believer that Saturn in the 12th and the 1st house are a little bit more difficult than perhaps the rest of the houses when Saturn is transiting. And I say this because the 12th house is the very end of your chart and the 1st house is the very beginning of your chart. And the 2nd house to the 11th house, all of that is the in-between, the middle, the nitty-gritty, but it's like the beginning and the end of a book or a movie are always some of the most monumental parts, right? So that's where I think of when planets are transiting, like your 12th and 1st houses. And so when a planet like Saturn, being as heavy and karmic and disciplinary as it can be, when it's transiting your 1st house, it has a way of really stifling your personality and really making your outward appearance to the world maybe a bit more stiff and awkward than it normally is before Saturn transited here. And the reason this happens is because your 1st house, your ascendant, it's your rising point, it's all about your sense of self. It's your personality, it's your identity in this world, whatever your rising sign is and what goes to your 1st house. And it's how others see us, and it's our view and our projection that's being put out into the world. And so Saturn coming in here is basically ridding your closet, and it's completely reorganizing your personality. It's really making you get in tune with who you are as a person and who you want to be. And if these are questions that you haven't really been thinking about very in depth before this transit, Saturn is going to make sure that you think about them. It is going to put you through experiences and tests and lessons and align you up with people that are going to force your growth. Now, if you are in a state where you are welcome of this and you're not resisting that, it's going to be a much easier process. And even with that, there's going to be difficulties and challenges. But if you resist it and you are not willing to let go of the parts of you that are not working anymore, and you just want to hold on tight and resist Saturn, it's going to be a shitstorm. Believe you me, it is going to be a shitstorm. I'm just going to share some of my personal experiences the last 3 years, because this has been a 3-year transit for me. Before Saturn started transiting my 1st house, I really, I was dealing with the fact that I was gay. I am a homosexual man, and it was a really hard thing for me to come to terms with in myself. I was raised in a very religious family, with parents, that both told me that is not okay, and grandparents, aunts and uncles. It's a very prominent view amongst my family. I have very supportive friends and I live in a very supportive community, but even in that, just that fear of my family finding out who I really was so scary to me. And not only them finding out who I was, but honestly just myself accepting this huge monumental change, and not even this change, I mean, it's who I've always been, but just because for as long as up until this point, I had been dating women my whole life. I'd only been with girls, and the world had seen me as this one way of being, and the thought of completely eradicating that and stepping into who I really am as a person was so scary. But I realized the further I got in this transit that you don't have to try to be who you are. You don't have to struggle to be who you are. If you're feeling struggle and tension and dis-ease, you're trying to be something you're not. And I started finding the more that I just let those pieces that were false and not true to me fall away, that what was already there, whether it be my sexuality or my spiritual views or what I want to be doing with my career, just anything that aligned with who I really am, is already here. You don't have to try to be what you already are. It's there. You don't even have to look for it. It's all the other shit and these layers that we put on ourselves that are so false and have nothing to do with who we are, that we use just to please people, and so others will look at us in a certain way, or for approval, whatever it might be. It's when we strip all that back that we get to the true layer of the essence of us. And that is really what Saturn has done for me in my first house. It didn't add anything new. What it did was take away all the bullshit so that the real truth of me could emerge. And I was very fortunate to have done a lot of traveling the past 3 years. Of course, you know, Saturn and Sagittarius is all about travel and exploration and adventure, and I found myself in some really amazing places around the world, in my own country, with great people that really helped me come into my own. The person I've always wanted to be, that I always knew I was on the inside, that just, it may have taken a little longer than I would have expected to fully emerge and to get where I am now, but I did. And that's what I'm taking away the most as I look at this transit in the last 3 years, is that I really have come out on the other side a man who can truly say who knows who he is. I feel like there are people in our world who are even in their 60s and 70s and 80s who don't truly know who they are. I can look back at the last several years and see how challenging it was. When Saturn first went into my first house and conjuncted my ascendant, my rising point, it felt brutal. It felt like this heavy weight. It was dense. It was heavy. There was a lot of depression and a lot of anxiety that was coming up for me, and it was a really intense time. It was a really, really intense time. So for people who are just now getting into the transit or in that part of it, you know, bear with it, and you know, you got to grit your teeth for a little while. There's going to be times that it's very rough when you've been used to living your life a certain way. And again, I have been speaking a lot on these layers that we have built up around ourselves and our ego to keep ourselves safe. When those have been there for a long time, for a while those served a purpose. And so when we're letting these old pieces of ourselves go, we have to honor what we're letting go of, and not just throw it in the trash, but, you know, compost it, you know, recycle it so that it can be turned into something new again. You know, these emotions we wear, and these the mental habits we have, and the clothes that we wear, all these different pieces of ourselves that we're saying goodbye to, we need to celebrate and realize that, you know, they were a piece of us too, and they served their purpose. Everything that we've done and experienced and had in our life has served its purpose, no matter, even if it's outworn, if it's outdated, and it's time to grow and evolve and say goodbye to those pieces of ourselves. We should still honor where we come from, because it's impossible to move forward in your life and speak your truth and walk your path if you're not willing to honor your past. That's why so many people stay stuck in it, is because they're not willing to accept it for what it was and honor it and say goodbye in a healthy way. That's what I've done. I've learned in this transit to say goodbye to my past in a healthy way, because to be fully in alignment with myself and true to this sense of self that I have, which is a big one, it's a strong one, you have to be willing to say goodbye to what doesn't serve you anymore. And you have to be willing to do it with grace. And there's going to be moments that you just want to cry and break down for the life that you thought you were going to have, and this picture you had in your mind of how things were going to be. Because when Saturn comes to your first house, it shows you that what you thought was going to be isn't really working for you anymore. And that there's a whole new direction, a whole new path that is way more in alignment with what is really true for you. So these have been some of the lessons that I've taken away from this transit. It's been a really big one for me, and I'm just been in this state of reflection and awe and all this nostalgia coming up, because it's been some of the most monumental years of my life, these last 3 years that I've spent with Saturn, going through my first. And while I am excited for the next phase, I'm gearing up for Saturn in my second, I am also gonna miss this time, and I truly honor and value it for everything that it was. So to all of you out there who are in Saturn in the first house, towards the end of it, or you're at the beginning of it, the middle, wherever you are with it right now, I wish you the best. Please comment down below. I do transit readings just for Saturn specifically. If you want a Saturn transit reading or any kind of chart reading from me, you can check out my email down in the description below, and I'll be happy to work with all of you. So happy holidays, everybody, and much aloha, and I'll see y'all next time. Bye.